everybody, as the clock ticks down towards the end of 2024, we're beginning to do best of shows on Keen On. And of course, who better than to do a best of show with our favorite literary critic, journalist, Bethanne Patrick, the book critic of the Los Angeles Times, and much more. She has her own podcast. She's the best read woman in America. I thought, Bethanne, we might begin with your five best novels of the year, your five favorite novels of the year. I'm not sure if best is a good word. And then in America in 2024, which has an increasingly fictionalized quality. I mean, America is always a fictional place, but particularly fictional, it would seem, in 2024. I mean, of course, we've got the Trump comeback. We've got America's latest pin-up heartthrob, Luigi Mangione, and The Assassin. I wonder, what is the state broadly in a kind of maybe ontological or philosophical, metaphysical sense? What's the state of fiction in an America in 2024 where reality is always increasingly unbelievable?
It's really true, Andrew. And I don't think we have spoken since before the election. So we haven't had a chance to talk about this truth being stranger than fiction. But I will say that one of the things, it might have been Julian Barnes who wrote
who's been on the show. Delightful man.
Yeah, delightful. He wrote a book, I believe, called England, about a theme park in England. And that's what it feels like right now. It feels like America, America, that we are turning into some version of Branson, Missouri, that we don't have a grasp on reality. And yet, the books that I'm choosing today for fiction, I think, have a very interesting lens, each of them, on reality. And I would argue that each of them also tells us more about reality than the actual facts right now do.
Yeah, and we're going to also, alongside this, we're going to do your best of five nonfiction. And one of those, a preview, is by Emily Nussbaum, The Invention of Reality Television.
Yes.
You also have a very interesting, beautifully written and wonderfully titled novel, Colored Television. It's an American novel by Danzy, Senna, and of course, inevitably it's hard to write about America without writing about either race or television, and she's brought the two together. So maybe this might be a good beginning to the perhaps hyper-real nature of America in 2024.
I think it's the perfect beginning because this novel is so real. It's about what it's like to be a pair of married creatives whose race and racial concerns almost disappear when they choose to relocate from New York to LA. I just want to point out, we're going to have, for the first time ever on my best of the year, a married pair of novelists, because Danzy Senna is married to Percival Everett. Now, in Colored Television, the two in the married pair, are a painter, a visual artist, and a writer. And
Isn't that rather unfair, Bethanne, that two such talented writers are married to one another? I hope they have an unhappy marriage.
It really is. It's terribly unfair. I mean, it's amazing. I would give anything to be at their breakfast table.
I hope they have arguments and rivalries and petty concerns.
Exactly. But you know what? Their novels could not be more different. And yet each of them has highly earned the place on this list. And again, I want to emphasize to everyone that these are my five favorites. They're not necessarily the best. I don't have any committee.
Well, for us, they're the best, because you're the best.
For us, they're the best. And so there's so much humor in this book. And Senna is biracial. Senna herself prefers to use the term mulatto. And that is not a term that I think white people can use or should use. But I want to point out that for Senna herself, it is about being really accurate. And it's about co-opting the term to show that it doesn't bother her or others who choose to use it. If it bothers you, Oh, well, but the book is so hilarious and so spot on. It's a book that erases race, if you will, in a way. It
Right,
doesn't
and
really.
that's what I wanted to ask. There was
Yeah.
a movie last year, and I can't remember it. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember its title. It was a literary movie about a black man who wrote a kind of parody of an angry black.
You mean American Fiction, which
Yeah,
was based on Erasure by Percival Everett.
right. So these people seem to have cornered the market in American creativity. Anyway, that was a wonderful movie because
It
it
was.
seemed to, you use the term mulatto, which is maybe a controversial term, but a
Yes.
historic one. Maybe it's an equally controversial but also historic term is post-racial. I thought that that movie was post-racial in a way, and that everyone now is in on the joke of the absurdity of race and whites and blacks in America. Blah, blah.
Well, that
Is it?
is such an interesting thing for you to
But let
say.
me just finish this,
Oh,
and then
sorry.
and would it be fair to call? And I haven't read colored television, so obviously I'm speaking from a position of profound ignorance. But it sounded to me, from the little bit of research I did, that this might be thought of as a post-racial book, in the sense that it sort of is ironic about how we treat race in the 2020s in America.
Well, and that is exactly what I wanted to respond to. I think it's very interesting. You could read it that way if you stayed on one level, because as I said, when this couple moves to LA and discovers how expensive everything is, how difficult it is to keep up with their new neighbors, it almost seems as if race disappears beneath socioeconomic concerns, which would naturally support what you just said, Andrew, about this being a post-racial novel. However, I think that Senna's humor, which is really, really sharp, it isn't cruel, it's just extremely incisive. And the humor is what shows that it still matters whether you're white or black. It still matters because there is white privilege. You can think, here I am in LA and I'm with all of these people of different cultures and cities and educations, but white privilege still
Yeah, in
exists.
LA, I mean, in spite of all the history, or perhaps because of the history of Watts and all that, if there is a post-racial city in America, it's probably Los Angeles.
Yeah, but it's still not quite post-racial. So I think this is one of the best books for book groups this year. And yet, if you're not in a book group, who cares? Because you are going to laugh and laugh, and you're going to see yourself, no matter what your race is, in colored television.
And
It
you
is
turn the television off. And of course, there used to be, when I was growing up, gives away my age, there was a term called color television, because
exactly.
and of course, the previous term was black and white, which adds to all the wordplay here. And I
It
assume that
does. It
comes up
does
in the
really add
novel.
to the wordplay. She is so smart. I love all of Senna's books, but this one, she's definitely done something very
So
special.
let me revise the question,
Mhm.
Bethanne, on this. I mean, obviously, race hasn't gone away, but always the assumption in America, and everyone who's ever come here has seen the same thing, is that race is the central issue in American history. Slavery, Civil War, civil rights, blah, blah. You note that there are lots of other realities too. There's class, there's gender, there's
Mhm.
sexuality. In this book, does race is race, I wouldn't say relegated, but placed amongst those, or is it still first amongst equals?
I think it is still first amongst equals, and this is something that we see not just because we see this family, there are children involved too. Raising children is very important in colored television, but the novel, colored television. But we also see that there are things about being an African American that are different from being another kind of American, blank American, insert any culture you want. Being an African American means living with a history of enslavement, living with a history of discrimination. I was just at the New Folger Shakespeare Library yesterday, and bear with me, Andrew, for a second. One of the things they had in their new exhibit space, which is really lovely, is the facsimile of the press copy of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. It is put up there on the wall, and I stood and read it. And I thought, here's Martin Luther King Jr. in 1963. And I hope I'm getting the speech correct. If I am, someone please correct me. But he is saying, we can't live with this anymore. We have to have equality. And here we are, 60 years later, we don't. And so there is a sense in colored television that the work is not done, and that is its right and proper message.
Well, you brought up James Percival Everett's book. I mean, it's ubiquitous. It's already it's won the 2024 Kirkus Prize, the National Book Award for fiction. He is, as you noted, the husband of Danzy Senna, the author of Colored Television. I think you've talked about James on the show before. It sounds like a I mean, books are always called instant classics, but it really does sound like one of those books that is an instant classic. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. And I will say something that I think is also fair. There are retellings of classic novels that are great. There are some that are meh, and there are some that I'd rather forget. This one deserves to be published with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Or maybe even it should just take over The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It is so masterful, and I should have used the word masterful. I wish our language, it is so well done. It is so expert. It is Percival Everett showing us a new kind of double consciousness. And by that, I mean, of course, African Americans have long used the term double consciousness to mean acting one way for themselves and acting another way for
the doubleness is, of course,
right. And so
actually a rich theme in African American writing.
Yes. And so here in James, this is writing that is about African Americans first and anyone else second. And James, the narrator, who was Jim, of course, in Huckleberry Finn, is the narrator, but also the person who is guiding everything for us through his story. And so I think it's a very, very important book because it does put his full humanity at the forefront, and it doesn't skip the tough parts. You know, this is an adventure story, and Jim is going to go through some very hard things and do some very hard things.
Let me bring up that term I just threw up with colored television, post-racial. I wonder, I mean, this book is astonishingly successful. I'm guessing most other fiction writers hate it. I mean, because it just takes all the oxygen out of the room. It's had it's only been published this year. It's got over 30,000 reviews on Amazon, 121,000 Goodreads. Steven Spielberg is turning it into a movie.
Yes.
I wonder whether a book like this, which is a kind of racial retelling of Huckleberry Finn, which of course was rooted in a highly racialized, racist America. I wonder whether that speaks of America's, because I assume that although there's a strong sort of mixed white and black reading of this book, whether this is a book, again, and correct me if I overuse this term, whether it's a book now where a post-racial America is ready, and Steven Spielberg, of course, the most mainstream middlebrow of American cultural creators, will make the movie of this. It's almost like Schindler's List and the Holocaust.
Exactly. And you know, that is, Everett didn't write a Spielbergian book. Okay. If Spielberg takes this on, I don't know. I'm not a film critic. I am not a huge Spielberg devotee, but all I can tell you is that Everett has written a book that is truly great. It is not simply a book that is the flavor of the month. It's not a book that's just a trick, that's just a little bit of a, I don't know, tossing something off. This is really an important book. I was quite surprised it didn't win the Booker, although I love Samantha Harby's Orbital as well. So it's, but I was surprised that James didn't win the Booker because it is that fine. He is truly a literary author of the highest order. And this is a novel in full. It's not something that is just an inversion of Twain, so that we can say, oh, look, we've got something new. Out of Huckleberry Finn. This is a book that actually brings, as I believe I said already, James's full humanity and full character.
People, I mean, this is the book that will be on everyone's shelves. As he said, it's already got 30,000 reviews on Amazon.
Right.
Are people reading this book? I mean, in your experience, Bethanne, when a book acquires this almost instant mythical status, do people actually read it?
That is an excellent question. I believe, for instance, the people I've talked to about it are people who have read it, but my circles are a little bit skewed. I know a lot of readers and writers and critics. So there's always a book. Every year, there's a book that people get because it is so highly buzzed, and then they put it on their shelves and they don't read it. I don't know yet, but let's talk. Let's see how long it takes for the paperback to come out, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the publishers are thrilled. Although, do you think that Percival Everett complained to Danzy Senna over breakfast he didn't win the Booker Prize? He needs the money, right?
I bet that he doesn't actually, because I think both.
I'm joking. I think he's.
I know you're joking, but I was going to say that I think both of them are just so. I think they have a really good handle on life overall. That's why I would like to be at their breakfast table.
I hope they live in LA looking down and they have a beautiful house and breakfast. Well, a smaller book, but another American book by Garth Greenwell, Small Rain.
Yes.
You brought him up before. What's so good about Garth Greenwell? Very different from both Everett and Senna, but nonetheless an American book.
So different, but so good. So this just came out in September, and I do think it's one of my favorites of the year because Garth Greenwell is, I think, at his foundations, a poet. And like his first novel, What Belongs to You, Small Rain is almost on spools. It doesn't feel like a traditional novel. There's not a lot of action. What it's based on is Greenwell's real life. In 2020, he was diagnosed, finally, it took a while, with, I'm not going to get this right, an aortic separation of some kind. And it's not, when you hear aortic, you think heart, but this happens in the gut. It's very, very dangerous. It's very rare in someone as young as Greenwell, who is in his 40s. And it caused him incredible pain. He was in the hospital for ages. He had to go through a lot of rehabilitation. And his partner, Luis, was absolutely instrumental in his recovery. So What Belongs to You was about desire. It was about how a man can claim his love for other men. And it was very much about sex. It was very much about lust and coupling and all the things that go with it. Small Rain is about pain. It's about the care you get, but from other people, from strangers. It's about recovering. It's about coming back to life, ultimately. It is really beautiful. And the reader is right there along with Greenwell all the way. And although it is based on his life, it is something that he's decided to put into fiction.
Right, we're somewhere between fiction and non-fiction. And
Right.
I was intrigued by another of your choices, the fourth choice, You Dreamed of Empires, a novel. We've done on the show a lot of new books, particularly non-fiction books about hallucinogenic drugs. They're becoming increasingly mainstream. In a sense,
Yeah.
this is a novel about not just colonialism, but the hallucinogenic, if that's the right pronunciation, the hallucinogenic quality, both literally and metaphorically, of colonialism. It sounds like a very
It
interesting book.
absolutely is. It's like it's almost as if you've gotten a big piece of taffy laced with hallucinogens, okay? It stretches the edges of fact so far, but it stays together. That is what I love about this book. This book should not work. This book should not be as amazing and fun and interesting as it is, but it's full of hegemonic nastiness. It's all about Cortez and his conquistadors coming to the Aztec Empire. And in this book, the figure we call Montezuma is known as Moctezuma. And it's really in the area where Mexico City is today. Okay. So they get to these gates, and one of the conquistadors, who's very much a civil servant, bureaucratic sort, winds up becoming friends with Moctezuma's daughter. And meanwhile, everyone is trying all of these crazy, as you said, hallucinogenic substances. And there are things that are put in here like 21st century music and TV characters. Everything gets mixed into this incredible brew that Enrique has put together. He's really well known in Mexico, but not in the United States. This is a fast, sharp story. It is not, when you look at that cover, if you could put that up again, that looks kind of like, oh, look, another sort of nice, I don't know, literary novel or whatever.
Yeah, it's got a horse on the front. Always a
Yeah,
bit.
it is just not like anything you've read before.
It has a sort of a vertigo quality as well.
It does. And that vertiginous quality is something that you slip into almost immediately. So if you've never done any kind of hallucinogenic substance, you've stayed away from the mushrooms and the tabs, this is a great way to feel that you're getting the experience.
Dip your toes into the hallucinogenic.
Exactly. I loved it. I loved it.
By reading the You Dreamed of Empire. In literary terms, Bethanne, the way you describe it, it sounds like a kind of a 2020s version of magical realism, of course, which is the richest of Latin American
Absolutely. This is
literary tradition.
Enrique is an heir to Borges, but one of my favorite novels ever is Hopscotch by Julio Cortázar. And I felt like Enrique really is writing in that tradition.
Well, this one sounds wonderful. And I hope Steven Spielberg will keep his hands off this one.
That's right. That's right.
He wouldn't know what to do with it.
He would not.
And finally, leaving the shores, both of North and South America, a European book, or a book set in a novel set in Europe, The Safekeep, a book about love and obsession, an erotic story of love and obsession in 1960s Amsterdam. I hadn't heard of this. This sounds very, very intriguing.
So good. This was also on the Booker shortlist. It's set in the Netherlands in the early 1960s or 50s. I might be getting... tough for me to get that right in my head at the moment. But in any case, we find ourselves with a youngish woman who's living in her family's home. She's unmarried. She's sort of a caretaker of the place because her brother has inherited it. She has two brothers. And the other brother decides to come around with his girlfriend, his new girlfriend, and the girlfriend's friend or just compatriot, let's say. Before you know it, the protagonist, Isabel, and the new girlfriend are engaged in the steamiest affair I mean, this is the first half of this book is really erotic. Okay. It is about obsession. It's about Isabel.
So this is good sex writing, not bad sex writing.
No, this is good sex writing. It's very good. But without any spoilers, the second half of the book is so different. You might feel as if you have whiplash, but a good kind of whiplash.
An erotic whiplash.
Not quite erotic whiplash.
I'm not sure there's such a thing.
Finish the book, you'll realize what an important book it is and why the first half is the way it is. And this is an historical novel. Again, I guess I'm a little obsessed between the Enrigue and the Van der Wouden, or Wouden, I'm not sure how to say it, because these are ways of looking at the past that aren't about taking this sort of factual, clear-eyed view. This is about viewing things in a different way. So Enrigue is through hallucinogenic substances. Van der Wouden is through the lens of lust. And both of them skew things. And I think that is very important. You asked at the beginning, Andrew, about fiction in America today. Now, clearly, these two authors are not American, but I think we have to start looking at historical events with different kinds of lenses, because if we just look at them with the clear light of day, they don't always make sense to us. I'm not enough of a scholar to be able to get us much further than that, but I do think we are increasingly drawn to fiction that shows us how to look, whether it's at an event or whether it's at something that happens to the body or something that happens to a culture like enslavement. We need new ways of looking at these things, because
and it seems the boundaries between fiction and nonfiction, which have always been very thin and moving all the time, they seem particularly thin and hard to pin down. And I hope in this book, I actually, this is a particularly intriguing novel. I hope there's no Vermeer or Rembrandt, since it's in Amsterdam.
None.
Anyone wanting Vermeer or Rembrandt, don't turn to this. I'm going to be doubly unfair, Bethanne. I'm going to ask for your best fiction book of the year, but you're not allowed to use James.
You know what? That's fair enough. So I'm
going to say that my one, I haven't read any of them, and it is The Safekeeper. I'm particularly intrigued. I think I'll get that book.
Ding, ding, ding. You're a winner twice over, because that, I would say, is my favorite of the year. When I first received it and first read it, no one was talking about it. No one. And now I've seen that it's gotten so much critical acclaim. I hope that readers are paying attention to it. And that's why I'm here to say this is my favorite, because this is a book that people need to read. This is a book that shows how easily a quote unquote normal family can be swept into the aegis of evil.
Well, Bethanne, wonderful conversation. And finally, good or bad year for fiction, 2024, or just another year?
I think it's been a good year. I think it's been a very good year, very interesting year. So we're going to see what happens in 2025. There are some bangers coming, I promise.
Well, we want to be banged in 2025, so to speak, borrowing your word. We will see you again in 2025. Happy New Year on the fiction front. And Bethanne, Patrick, always a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your summary of the best novels of 2024.
Thanks, Andrew.